Nadia's hands are trembling as she stares at the diamond ring Blake just slipped onto her finger, and she knows, with a kind of bone-deep certainty that comes right before you ruin your entire life, that she's about to do something that will destroy them both. "Just 5 minutes," he'd said 20 seconds ago, his voice rough with desperation. "Please. Just pretend you're my fiancée for 5 minutes, and I'll pay you $50,000. The ring weighs nothing and everything. It's catching the light from the crystal chandelier above them, throwing tiny rainbows across her knuckles, and she can't stop thinking about how her rent is 3 months overdue and her little sister needs surgery and this beautiful, broken man standing in front of her is about to lose the only family he has left. 5 minutes. That's all he needs. But as she looks up into his desperate green eyes, as she feels the warmth of his palm still lingering on her hand from when he slid the ring into place, as she hears his grandfather's lawyer clearing his throat impatiently from across the mahogany table, she realizes 5 minutes isn't going to be enough. Not for what she's about to do. "Blake," she whispers, and her voice cracks on his name. "I need to tell you something first." His face goes pale. They both know this isn't part of the plan. 2 hours earlier. The coffee shop smells like burnt espresso and shattered dreams, which is fitting because Nadia-chan is pretty sure she's about to have a complete breakdown right here between the mismatched chairs and the chalkboard menu that hasn't been updated since 2019. Her phone buzzes against the scarred wooden table. Another text from her landlord. Another threat wrapped in fake politeness. Another reminder that she's failing at literally everything. She doesn't read it. She can't. Instead, she stares at the rejection email pulled up on her laptop screen, the 14th one this month, and tries to figure out how telling someone their writing lacks the emotional depth we're looking for is supposed to be constructive criticism. "Excuse me." The voice cuts through her spiral of self-pity like a knife through butter. Deep warm, with just a hint of roughness that makes something in her chest flutter before she can stop it. She looks up. And immediately forgets how to breathe. Welcome back to the channel, my sweet and loyal family. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's continue. The man standing beside her table looks like he stepped out of a magazine, not one of those glossy fashion ones, but something more dangerous. Something that comes with warnings about falling in love with men who have secrets written in the set of their shoulders and pain hidden behind their perfect smiles. He's tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably costs more than her yearly income. His dark hair is slightly messed up, like he's been running his fingers through it, and his green eyes are the kind of green that makes you think of storms and forests and all the ways nature can be beautiful and terrifying at the same time. But it's not his looks that steal her breath. It's the desperation written across his face, raw and real and so completely at odds with his expensive clothes that she feels her heart crack open just looking at him. "I'm sorry to bother you," he says, and she can hear the tremor in his voice that he's trying so hard to hide. "But I need your help, and I know this is going to sound insane, but—" "Sit down," she says, closing her laptop. "You look like you're about to collapse." He blinks at her, clearly not expecting kindness. It makes her chest ache. "I don't have time to sit down," he says, but his hands are shaking as he pulls out his phone to check it. "I have," he stops, runs a hand through his hair. "God, I have 15 minutes to find someone who can." He looks at her again, really looks at her, and something in his expression shifts. "You're beautiful." The words hit her like a physical blow. Not because she's never been called beautiful before, but because of the way he says it, like it's a revelation, like it's the answer to a prayer he didn't know he was praying. Thank you, but that's not why I told you to sit down," she manages, feeling heat flood her cheeks. "You look like you're in trouble." He laughs, but there's no humor in it. Trouble doesn't even begin to cover it. He glances at his phone again, and she sees his Adam's apple bob as he swallows hard. "My grandfather is dying." The words hang in the air between them, heavy and final. "I'm sorry," she whispers, and means it. "He's been dying for months," Blake continues, his voice getting rougher with each word. "Cancer. The doctor said he had 6 months, maybe 8 if he was lucky. That was 10 months ago." He sits down across from her without seeming to realize he's doing it. "He's been holding on, you know. Stubborn old bastard refuses to give up. But today—" He stops, closes his eyes. "Today the doctor said it's time. Hours, maybe a day." Nadia's heart is breaking for this stranger, this beautiful broken man who's sharing his pain with her like she's someone who matters. What can I do? There's a condition in his will, Blake says, opening his eyes to look at her. I know how this sounds, but my grandfather, he's old-fashioned. Traditional. He made his fortune in the 50s, built it from nothing, and the only thing he's ever wanted was to see me settle down with a good woman before he dies. Understanding starts to dawn, cold and impossible. He's been asking about my girlfriend for months, Blake continues. Begging to meet her. And I keep making excuses because... He laughs bitterly. Because she doesn't exist. I made her up. Created this whole elaborate story about this amazing woman I was planning to propose to, all because I couldn't stand to see the disappointment in his eyes when I told him the truth. What truth? That I'm alone. The words come out raw, stripped of all pretense. That I'm 32 years old and I've never been in love. That I'm so focused on work, so terrified of becoming like my father, that I've never let anyone close enough to matter. What would you do in this situation? Would you help a stranger carrying this kind of pain? Let me know in the comments below. And now he's dying, Blake continues, and his lawyer just called. He wants to meet her. Today. In 1 hour. He wants to give me his blessing before. His voice breaks. Before it's too late. Nadia stares at him, her mind racing. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? Fiancée, actually. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small velvet box. I bought this ring 6 months ago, been carrying it around like some kind of talisman. Thought maybe if I had it, I'd find someone worth giving it to. He opens the box, revealing a stunning diamond solitaire that catches the light and throws it back in 1,000 different directions. I know this is crazy. I know you don't know me from Adam. But I'm desperate, and you're perfect. I'm not perfect, she says automatically, but her eyes are locked on the ring. It's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen, and she's imagining what it would feel like to wear it, to be the kind of woman who deserves something that precious. You are to him, Blake says. You're exactly what he'd want for me. Beautiful, kind, real. I can see it in your eyes. You care about people. You told a stranger to sit down because he looked upset. You listened to my sob story without running away or calling security. Maybe I'm just too broke to afford to run away, she says, trying for humor but landing somewhere closer to truth. Something flickers in his eyes. Are you? In trouble, I mean. She thinks about lying, but there's something about this moment, about the raw honesty he's shown her, that makes deception impossible. Yeah, I am. How much trouble? The kind where I'm about to lose my apartment and my sister needs surgery. I can't afford trouble. He nods slowly, like he's making a decision. $50,000. Her heart stops. What? I'll pay you $50,000 to spend 1 hour with me. To wear this ring and let me introduce you as my fiancée. To hold my hand and smile and let a dying old man believe that the grandson he loves isn't going to be alone when he's gone. $50,000. It's more money than she's ever seen at once. It's her rent for the next 2 years. It's her sister's surgery. It's the difference between drowning and swimming, between giving up and fighting. I can't, she whispers, but even as she says it, she knows she's going to say yes. She has to say yes. I don't know how to be a fiancée. I don't know how to be the kind of woman who belongs with someone like you. You don't have to be anyone but yourself, he says, leaning forward. That's all I need. Just be yourself, and let me take care of the rest. She stares at him, this gorgeous stranger who's offering her salvation wrapped in a lie. What's your name? Blake Morrison. Morrison. As in Morrison Industries, the construction empire that built half of Seattle. She should have recognized him from the magazines, the society pages, the business news. But here in this coffee shop, with desperation written across his face and pain in his eyes, he doesn't look like a billionaire playboy. He looks like a man who's about to lose everything that matters. And you're sure this will work? Your grandfather will believe we're really engaged. He'll believe it because he wants to believe it, Blake says. Because he spent the last 10 months listening to me talk about how much I love you, how you're the best thing that ever happened to me, how I can't wait for him to meet you. The words hit her like a physical blow. You've been talking about me for 10 months? About the woman I wished you were, he says quietly. About the woman I created in my head because I couldn't face the reality of who I actually am. And that's when she knows she's lost. Not because of the money, not because of the desperation in his eyes, but because she understands exactly what he means. She spent her whole life wishing she was someone else, someone stronger, someone who mattered. Maybe for 1 hour, she can be that person. Okay, she says, and watches his face transform with relief. I'll do it. Now. So here they are, 45 minutes later, standing in the most opulent office she's ever seen, surrounded by mahogany and leather and the kind of old money that whispers instead of shouts. Blake's grandfather lies in the hospital bed that's been set up by the window, his skin paper-thin but his eyes sharp as steel as he studies her face. So you're the girl who finally caught my grandson's heart, he says, his voice weak but warm. Come here, child. Let me look at you. Nadia approaches the bed on trembling legs, hyper-aware of Blake's presence beside her, of the weight of the ring on her finger, of the lies they're about to tell this dying man. But as she gets closer, as she sees the love in the old man's eyes when he looks at Blake, the hope written across his weathered face, she realizes something that makes her blood run cold. She recognizes him. Not from magazines or newspaper photos, but from somewhere else. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere that's going to change everything. Mr. Morrison, she says, her voice barely a whisper. Do you remember a little girl named Mei-Lin Chen? From the Children's Hospital? About 15 years ago. The old man's eyes widen, and Blake goes very still beside her. My sister, she continues, her heart pounding so hard she can barely speak. You paid for her surgery. Her heart surgery. You saved her life, and you never let us know who you were. The hospital just said an anonymous donor had covered everything. The silence in the room is deafening. Nadia, Blake says quietly, warning in his voice. What are you doing? She turns to look at him, this man who hired her to lie to his dying grandfather, this man who has no idea that his family already saved hers once before. I'm telling the truth. And that's when she does it, the thing that will shock him, the thing that will change everything. She slides the engagement ring off her finger and places it gently on the bedside table. I can't lie to you, Mr. Morrison, she says, turning back to the old man whose eyes are now filled with understanding. I'm not Blake's fiancée. He hired me an hour ago to pretend to be, because he loves you and he didn't want you to worry about him being alone. Blake makes a sound like he's been punched in the gut. But here's the thing, she continues, her voice growing stronger with each word. I may not be his fiancée, but I know who he is now. He's the grandson of the man who saved my family. Who taught me that there are still good people in this world. Who showed me that sometimes angels don't have wings. They have checkbooks and kind hearts and grandsons who love them so much they'll do anything to make them happy. She reaches out and takes the old man's hand, feels how fragile it is, how precious. Your grandson is extraordinary, she says. And maybe I'm not his fiancée, but I'd be honored to be his friend. I'd be honored to sit here with both of you, for as long as you'd like, and tell you all the ways he's already changed my life. The old man is crying now, silent tears streaming down his cheeks. Blake is staring at her like she's grown a second head. You beautiful, foolish child, the old man whispers. Don't you see? You just proved you're exactly the kind of woman he needs. The silence stretches between them like a live wire, crackling with electricity and the weight of everything that's just changed. Blake's grandfather, William Morrison, Nadia now knows, is still holding her hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man who's supposed to be dying. Sit, William says, patting the bed beside him. Both of you. We need to talk. Blake hasn't moved since she took off the ring. He's standing there like a statue, his face cycling through emotions too quickly for her to track. Shock, betrayal, something that might be admiration, and underneath it all, a raw vulnerability that makes her chest ache. Grandpa, he starts, his voice rough. I can explain. Explain what? William's voice is stronger now, more like the steel magnate who built an empire from nothing. That you love me enough to hire a stranger to make me happy? That you've been torturing yourself for months, trying to be what you think I want instead of who you are. Blake flinches like he's been slapped. Or maybe, William continues, his eyes twinkling with something that looks suspiciously like mischief. You want to explain how you managed to accidentally hire the one girl in Seattle who's already family? I'm not family, Nadia says quickly, but William squeezes her hand. Child, you became family the moment I held your sister's tiny hand in that hospital room and promised her she was going to be okay. His voice goes soft with memory. Mei-Lin. Such a fighter. How is she now? She's perfect, Nadia whispers, tears threatening again. She's 17, about to graduate high school. Wants to be a doctor. She doesn't even remember being sick, but She stops, unable to continue. But you remember, William says gently. You remember being 13 years old and terrified you were going to lose the only family you had left. Nadia nods, not trusting her voice. Blake is staring at her now, really looking at her for the first time since this started. Your parents. Car accident when I was 12, she says, still not looking at him. Maylin was 2, had just been diagnosed with a heart condition. I became her legal guardian at 13. Jesus, Blake breathes. Language, William chides automatically, but his attention is focused on Nadia. You raised your sister alone. Not alone, she says, finally looking up at William. Your foundation helped with so much more than just the surgery. The social worker said there was a scholarship fund, money for living expenses, even help with college applications when the time came. You didn't just save her life, you saved mine too. William looks pleased, but there's something else in his expression. Something calculating. And what do you do now, dear? I'm a writer. Or trying to be. Freelance mostly, some copywriting, working on a novel. She trails off, realizing how pathetic it sounds. I'm not very good at it, apparently. She's wrong, Blake says suddenly, and both Nadia and William look at him in surprise. I've been watching her for the last hour. The way she talks, the way she thinks, she sees things. Really sees them. That's not something you can teach. The unexpected defense makes her heart skip. You don't know anything about my writing. I know you saw through my bullshit in about 30 seconds, he says, moving closer to the bed. I know you figured out exactly what I needed to hear without me telling you. I know you just did the hardest thing in the world, told the truth when lying would have been easier and more profitable. That's not writing, that's everything, he interrupts, and the intensity in his voice makes her shiver. That's what real writing is. Truth. Even when it costs you. William is watching this exchange with the sharp attention of a man who spent 70 years reading people and situations. Blake, son, why don't you tell me about your real love life? Blake's jaw tightens. There isn't one. By choice. By necessity. Blake runs a hand through his hair, messing it up even more. You know what Dad was like. What Mom went through. I swore I'd never. Your father was a weak man who couldn't handle success, William cuts him off sharply. You are not your father. How do you know? The question comes out raw, desperate. How do you know I won't turn into him the moment I have something real to lose? The pain in his voice is so acute that Nadia finds herself reaching out before she can stop herself, her fingers brushing against his hand. The contact sends electricity shooting up her arm, and from the way Blake goes still, he feels it too. Because, William says quietly, your father never would have hired a stranger to make me happy. He never would have put my peace of mind above his own pride. And he sure as hell never would have been smart enough to accidentally find the perfect woman. We're not, Blake starts, but William holds up a hand. I'm dying, boy. Let me have some fun with this. He turns to Nadia with a smile that's pure mischief. Tell me, dear, what did you think of my grandson before you knew who he was? Nadia's cheeks burn. I thought. She glances at Blake, sees him watching her intently. I thought he was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. And the saddest. Blake's breath catches audibly. And now? William prompts. Now I think he's an idiot, she says, which makes William laugh and Blake look offended. He thinks he's broken, but he's not. He's just scared. Which is understandable, considering he's apparently been carrying around an engagement ring for 6 months without anyone to give it to. Hey, Blake protests. That ring wasn't for just anyone. Oh really? She raises an eyebrow. Then who was it for? The question hangs in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them is ready to face. Someone like you, Blake says finally, his voice so quiet she almost doesn't hear it. The words hit her like a physical blow. Not because they're romantic, though they are, but because of the way he says them. Like he's admitting something that scares him. Like he's telling her a secret he's never told anyone. Asterisk, what do you think Blake means by someone like you? Is he falling for Nadia already, or is this something deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments. Asterisk. Blake, William says gently, why don't you take Nadia down to the kitchen? Maria probably has dinner ready, and I need to make some phone calls. It's clearly a dismissal, but there's something in William's tone that suggests this isn't just about food. Blake seems to hear it too, because he nods reluctantly. Will you? Blake looks at Nadia uncertainly. I mean, you don't have to, but would you mind staying? For dinner? I know this whole thing has been insane, and you don't owe me anything, but… I'll stay, she says, surprised by how much she means it. But I want to know more about your foundation. About how you chose which families to help. I didn't choose, William says. I had people for that. Social workers, doctors, administrators. I just wrote the checks. But why children's hospitals specifically? Something shifts in William's expression, becomes softer and infinitely sadder. Because I lost a child once. Long before Blake was born. A daughter. She was 2 years old when her heart just stopped. This was 1962, when pediatric cardiology was still in its infancy. The doctors said if it had happened 10 years later, they probably could have saved her. The air in the room goes thick with grief. Blake's face has gone pale. Grandpa, he says quietly. You never told me. It's not something you talk about, William says simply. Your grandmother and I, we carried that pain for 40 years. But when we started making real money, when the company took off, she came to me one day and said, we can't bring Rebecca back, but we can make sure other children don't die for lack of money. He looks at Nadia. Your sister was the 437th child we helped. 437, Nadia repeats numbly. 38 after her, then we stopped counting. It felt too much like keeping score with lives. William's voice is getting weaker again, the burst of energy fading. But I remember her, your Mei Lin. Such serious eyes for such a little thing. She asked me if the scar on her chest would make boys not like her when she grew up. Nadia's hand flies to her own chest, where her heart is breaking. What did you tell her? I told her that any boy who couldn't see past a scar to the brave, beautiful heart underneath wasn't worth her time. William's eyes crinkle. And I told her that her big sister loved her enough to move mountains, so she was going to be just fine. The tears come then, hot and unstoppable. Nadia tries to wipe them away, but there are too many, and her hands are shaking. Hey, Blake says softly, moving closer. Hey, it's okay. It's not okay, she manages between sobs. I've been so angry. So scared. Thinking I was doing everything wrong, that I wasn't enough, that I was failing her. And all this time your family was. The reason she's alive, Blake finishes gently. The reason you both are. She looks up at him through her tears, this man who an hour ago was a stranger and who now feels like something much more dangerous. Something like fate. This is crazy, she whispers. Yeah, he agrees, reaching out to brush a tear from her cheek. His thumb lingers against her skin, and she can feel herself leaning into the touch before she catches herself. But maybe crazy isn't always bad. The moment stretches between them, charged with possibility and the weight of everything they're both trying not to acknowledge. She's still wearing his grandfather's blood on her finger from where she took the ring off, still feeling the phantom weight of it, still remembering how right it felt for those few precious seconds. Blake, William says, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Take her to dinner. And son. Yeah, Grandpa. Don't you dare let her leave tonight without getting her number. Blake's cheeks flush red. Grandpa. I'm serious. I may be dying, but I'm not blind. The way you two are looking at each other. William grins. Well, let's just say I might get that granddaughter-in-law after all. Mr. Morrison, Nadia starts, but he waves her off. Call me William. Or Grandpa, if you're feeling brave. His eyes are twinkling again. After all, you're family now. Whether Blake likes it or not. As they leave the room, Nadia can hear William on the phone, his voice stronger than it's been all day. Maria? Yes, set 2 more places for dinner. We're having guests. Important guests. Blake closes the door behind them, and suddenly they're alone in the hallway, the weight of everything that's happened pressing down between them. So, he says, shoving his hands in his pockets. That was insane, she finishes. I was going to say life-changing, but insane works too. They start walking down the hallway, their footsteps echoing off the marble floors. The house is massive, all soaring ceilings and priceless art, but somehow it doesn't feel cold. It feels like a home. Blake, she says as they reach the top of a grand staircase. Can I ask you something? After everything that just happened? You can ask me anything. Why haven't you ever been in love? He stops walking, turns to look at her. Who says I haven't? You did. In the coffee shop. You said you'd never been in love. I said I'd never let anyone close enough to matter. His eyes are dark, intense. That's not the same thing. Understanding hits her like a physical blow. You have been in love. You just never told them. Hard to tell someone you love them when you've spent years making sure they don't know you exist. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He laughs, but there's no humor in it. Yeah, well, add it to the list. What list? All the ways I'm apparently an idiot. He starts walking again, taking the stairs 2 at a time. According to you, anyway. She hurries to keep up with him, her heels clicking against the marble. I didn't call you an idiot for being afraid. I called you an idiot for thinking you're broken. Same thing. No, it's not. She grabs his arm, forcing him to stop and look at her. Being afraid means you care about something enough to be scared of losing it. Being broken means you can't care at all. Trust me, I know the difference. Something shifts in his expression as he looks down at her. And which one are you? The question catches her off guard. What? Afraid or broken? Because from where I'm standing, you look pretty terrified too. He's right, and they both know it. Standing here in his grandfather's house, wearing clothes that cost more than her monthly income, pretending she belongs in this world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers, she's never been more scared in her life. Both, she admits quietly. I'm both. And that's when she realizes the real problem. It's not that Blake hired her to pretend to be his fiancée. It's not that his grandfather saved her sister's life. It's not even that she's standing in a mansion feeling like Cinderella at the ball. It's that somewhere between the coffee shop and this moment, she started to wish the pretending was real. And from the way Blake is looking at her, like she's something precious and fragile and worth protecting, she's starting to think he wishes the same thing. Which is why, when Maria appears at the bottom of the stairs to announce that dinner is ready, Nadia knows she's in more trouble than she ever imagined. Because $50,000 was supposed to buy Blake 1 hour of her time. But he's already stolen something much more valuable. He's stolen her heart. Dinner at the Morrison mansion is nothing like what Nadia expected. She'd imagined something formal and intimidating, crystal goblets and 7-course meals served by silent staff in white gloves. Instead, she finds herself sitting at a rustic wooden table in the kitchen, sharing homemade lasagna with Blake while Maria, the housekeeper who's clearly more family than employee, tells embarrassing stories about Blake's childhood. And then, Maria says, gesturing with her fork for emphasis, little Blake, he couldn't have been more than 8, walks into his grandfather's board meeting wearing nothing but his underwear and a cape made from a bedsheet. Maria, Blake groans, his cheeks flushed red. You promised you'd never tell that story. I promised I wouldn't tell it to your dates, Maria corrects with a wicked grin. But Nadia isn't a date, is she? She's family. The word hits Nadia like a physical blow. Family. She spent so many years with it just being her and Mei Lin that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something bigger. What did you want to be when you grew up? She asks Blake, partly to rescue him from further embarrassment and partly because she genuinely wants to know. When you were running around in superhero underwear? A fireman, he says without hesitation. Or a doctor. Or a superhero, obviously. His smile fades slightly. I wanted to save people. And now you build things instead. Now I build things that make money, he corrects, and there's something bitter in his voice. There's a difference. Maria makes a disapproving sound. Mijo, you built 3 new children's hospitals in the last 5 years. How is that not saving people? Blake looks uncomfortable. That was Grandpa's idea. His money. His money, your design, Maria argues. His vision, your hands. You think those buildings designed themselves. Nadia is watching this exchange with growing fascination. There's clearly more to Blake Morrison than the tortured billionaire playboy routine he presented in the coffee shop. You designed hospitals, she asks. I'm an architect, he says, as if it's no big deal. Structural engineering, specifically. The construction company was my grandfather's thing, but I've always been more interested in the actual building process. He's being modest, Maria says. Blake revolutionized earthquake-resistant design for high-rise buildings. That's why Morrison Industries has contracts all over the Pacific Rim now. Maria, Blake warns. What? I'm proud of you. Your grandfather's proud of you. The only person who doesn't seem to appreciate what you've accomplished is you. An uncomfortable silence falls over the table. Nadia can feel the undercurrents of old arguments, old wounds that run deeper than she understands. What about you? Blake asks, clearly wanting to change the subject. What did you want to be when you grew up? A writer, she says immediately, then catches herself. I wanted to tell stories. I used to make up fairy tales for Mei Lin when she was little, especially when she was in the hospital. The nurses said it was the only thing that would calm her down during the procedures. What kind of stories? Ridiculous ones, she laughs, remembering. There was this whole series about a princess who could talk to medical equipment. She'd convince the 4 bags to be gentler, negotiate with the heart monitors to stop beeping so loud. Blake's expression has gone soft. That's not ridiculous. That's brilliant. It's silly kid stuff. It's taking a terrifying situation and making it magical, he corrects. That's what the best writers do. They take the things that scare us and transform them into something we can understand. The way he's looking at her, like she's something precious and important, makes her chest tight. You don't even know if I'm a good writer. I know you made a dying old man laugh today. I know you turned what should have been the worst day of my life into something. He stops, shakes his head. I don't know what this is, but it's not what I expected. The air between them crackles with tension, with all the things they're not saying. Maria, who's been watching this exchange with the sharp eyes of someone who's seen her share of romance, clears her throat diplomatically. I should check on Mr. Morrison, she says, standing up. You two finish eating. And Blake? Show her the library. She looks like someone who'd appreciate a good library. After Maria leaves, the kitchen feels smaller, more intimate. Blake is sitting across from her, his sleeves rolled up, his hair still messed up from running his fingers through it, looking nothing like the polished businessman from the coffee shop and everything like someone she could fall in love with. Which is a problem, because falling in love with Blake Morrison would be the stupidest thing she's ever done. Can I ask you something? She says, twirling pasta around her fork just to have something to do with her hands. Shoot. Why did you really make up a girlfriend? And don't say it was just to make your grandfather happy. There's more to it than that. Blake goes very still. For a moment she thinks he's going to deflect again, give her another carefully crafted non-answer. Then he sighs and pushes his plate away. Because he's been trying to set me up for years, he says finally. Every charity gala, every business dinner, every family gathering, there's always some perfectly suitable woman he just happens to have invited. Daughters of business partners, socialites, politicians' wives looking for husband number 2. And you're not interested? I'm not interested in being someone's perfect acquisition. His voice is tight with old frustration. I don't want to be married for my money or my connections or my potential as arm candy at society events. So you invented someone who would love you for yourself. I invented someone who didn't exist, he corrects. Because it seemed easier than admitting that I don't know how to be loved for myself. I don't even know what that would look like. The raw honesty in his voice makes her heart ache. Blake. You want to know the really pathetic part? He laughs bitterly. I've been carrying that ring around for 6 months, and I couldn't even tell you what kind of woman I bought it for. I just walked into the jewelry store and pointed at the first one that looked like something from a fairy tale. Why a fairy tale? Because that's what I wanted. Something magical. Something that would make all the rational practical reasons for getting married seem ridiculous in comparison. He looks up at her, and there's something vulnerable and desperate in his eyes. I wanted to feel like the prince in one of those stories you told your sister. The one who's willing to fight dragons and climb towers and give up kingdoms, all for love. The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they're romantic, though they are, but because she understands exactly what he means. She's spent her whole life being practical, responsible, sensible. Taking care of Mei Lin, working multiple jobs, choosing security over dreams every single time. But sitting here with Blake, looking into his eyes, she can feel something reckless stirring in her chest. Something that wants to believe in fairy tales. Asterisk, do you believe in fairy tale love, or do you think Blake is being naive? What would you do in Nadia's position? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Asterisk. Show me the library, she says suddenly. Blake blinks. What? Maria said you should show me the library. I want to see it. They leave the dishes for Maria and walk through the house, past oil paintings and antique furniture that probably cost more than most people's houses. But Nadia barely notices any of it, because Blake is walking beside her, close enough that she can smell his cologne, close enough that their hands brush occasionally as they move. The library is breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books, a rolling ladder, comfortable reading chairs positioned by tall windows that look out over the Seattle skyline. It's exactly the kind of room she's dreamed about since she was a little girl. Oh my God, she breathes, turning in a slow circle. This is incredible. My grandmother's doing, Blake says, watching her reaction with something that looks like delight. She was a librarian before she married Grandpa. Insisted that any house they built had to have a proper library. Nadia moves to one of the shelves, running her fingers along the spines of the books. First editions, classics, poetry collections, modern fiction, it's a reader's paradise. She had good taste, she murmurs, pulling out a worn copy of Jane Eyre. That was her favorite, Blake says, moving closer. She used to read it to me when I was sick. Jane Eyre? That's a pretty intense bedtime story for a kid. I had pneumonia when I was 7. Spent 2 weeks in bed, bored out of my mind. She said if I was old enough to complain about being bored, I was old enough for real literature. He smiles at the memory. By the time I was better, I'd made her read the whole thing twice. Nadia opens the book, sees notes in the margins written in faded purple ink. She annotated it. She annotated everything. Said books were meant to be conversations, not museums. There's something about standing here in his grandmother's library, surrounded by her books and her thoughts and her love for literature, that makes everything feel more real. More possible. Blake, she says, closing the book and turning to face him. What happens after tonight? The question hangs in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them is ready to address directly. I don't know, he says honestly. I hadn't thought past getting through dinner. And now? He steps closer, close enough that she has to tilt her head back to look at him. Now I'm trying to figure out how to ask you to stay without sounding like a complete stalker. Stay for what? I don't know, he admits. Coffee tomorrow morning? Breakfast? The rest of my life. The last part comes out so quietly she almost doesn't hear it, but when she does, her breath catches. Blake. I know it's crazy, he says quickly. I know we just met. I know this whole thing started as a lie and I have no right to ask you for anything else. But Nadia, I can't remember the last time I felt like this. Like what? Like myself, he says simply. Like someone I actually want to be. The words break something open in her chest. Because she knows exactly what he means. She spent the last hour feeling more alive, more present, more herself than she has in years. I can't, she whispers, even as every cell in her body is screaming at her to say yes. Why not? Because this isn't real. This house, this life, none of it's real. I'm a struggling writer who can barely pay her rent, and you're Blake Morrison. In the real world, we don't even exist in the same universe. This is the real world, he says, stepping even closer. This conversation right here, right now, this is as real as it gets. Is it? Or is this just an extension of the fantasy? You hired me to play a part, Blake. What if that's all this is? What if I'm just a better actress than either of us realized? The question hits him like a slap. She can see it in the way his face changes, the way he takes a step back. You think I'm that shallow? He asks quietly. You think I can't tell the difference between performance and truth? I think you want something so badly that you're willing to believe anything that looks like it might be real. And I think you're so scared of being hurt that you're willing to throw away something good before it has a chance to hurt you. They stare at each other across the sudden chasm that's opened between them, both breathing hard, both fighting battles that have nothing to do with each other and everything to do with their own fears. Nadia, Blake says finally, his voice rough. What are you really afraid of? The question cuts straight to the heart of everything she's been trying not to think about. I'm afraid, she says, her voice barely a whisper, that if I let myself believe this is real, if I let myself fall for you, I'll lose myself completely. I've spent 15 years being responsible, being practical, being the person who takes care of everyone else. And you make me want to be reckless. You make me want to forget about consequences and just jump. And that scares you. It terrifies me. Blake is quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he's trying to memorize it. Can I tell you a secret? He says finally. She nods. I bought that ring 6 months ago, right after my grandfather's first heart attack. I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, watching all these families rally around their loved ones, and I realized that if something happened to me, there wouldn't be anyone to call. No one who would drop everything to be there. No one who would hold my hand or fight with the doctors or refuse to leave my side. His voice breaks slightly on the last words. So I went out and bought a ring, like some kind of talisman. Like if I had it, maybe I'd find someone worth giving it to. Someone who would choose me, not my money or my name or what I could do for them. Just me. Nadia's eyes are filling with tears she doesn't want to shed. And then today, he continues, I met this incredible woman who told a stranger to sit down because he looked upset. Who listened to my pathetic sob story without running away. Who gave up $50,000 because she couldn't lie to a dying old man. Who looked at me like I was worth something, even when she thought I was just some random guy falling apart in a coffee shop. He reaches out, cups her face in his hands. So yeah, maybe I am willing to believe anything that looks like it might be real. Because for the first time in my life, something actually does feel real. You feel real. And that's when she knows she's lost. Because he's right. This, whatever this is between them, feels more real than anything she's experienced in years. More real than her carefully controlled life. More real than her practical plans and sensible decisions. More real than the fear that's kept her safe and alone for so long. Blake, she whispers. Yeah. I think I'm about to do something really stupid. What's that? Instead of answering, she rises up on her toes and kisses him. It's supposed to be soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. But the moment their lips touch, something electric passes between them, and soft becomes desperate, tentative becomes hungry, question becomes answer. He pulls her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other sliding around her waist, and she can taste the wine on his lips, can feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. This is what she was afraid of, this overwhelming, consuming want that makes everything else fade away. When they finally break apart, they're both breathing hard, both staring at each other like they can't quite believe what just happened. That was stupid, she says, but she doesn't step away from him. Yeah, he agrees, his thumb tracing her lower lip. Want to be stupid again? And God help her, she does. She wants to be stupid and reckless and irresponsible. She wants to forget about rent and responsibilities and all the reasons this can't work. She wants to believe in fairy tales. Yes, she whispers. This time when he kisses her, it's slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility and all the ways they're about to complicate their lives. She lets herself sink into it, lets herself imagine what it would be like to have this every day, to wake up in his arms, to belong somewhere like this. They're so lost in each other that they don't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Don't realize they're no longer alone until someone clears their throat loudly behind them. They spring apart like guilty teenagers, turning to find William standing in the doorway, leaning heavily on a walker but grinning like he's just won the lottery. Well, he says, his eyes twinkling with mischief. This is interesting. Blake's face is crimson. Grandpa, we were just proving my point, William finishes. You two can lie to yourselves all you want, but you can't lie to me. I've been watching people fall in love for 70 years, and I know what it looks like. We're not, Nadia starts, but William holds up a hand. Child, I'm dying. I don't have time for denials and protestations. You want each other, it's written all over your faces. The question is, What are you going to do about it? Blake and Nadia look at each other, both struggling to find words that make sense. I have a proposition, William continues, moving into the room with the careful steps of someone whose body is failing but whose mind is sharp as ever. Nadia, dear, how would you like a job? A job? She repeats, confused. Blake needs a biographer. Someone to document the Morrison family history, write the story of the foundation, maybe even help him write his own book about sustainable architecture and earthquake resistance. William's grin widens. It would be a 6-month contract, very well paid, with housing provided here at the house. Nadia's heart stops. You want me to move in here? I want you to have a reason to stay, William says simply. Both of you are so busy being terrified of your feelings that you're going to talk yourselves out of something that could be extraordinary. This way, you'll have time to figure out what this is without the pressure of making life-altering decisions in one evening. Blake is staring at his grandfather like he's grown a second head. You're trying to play matchmaker. I'm trying to give you a chance, William corrects. Both of you. Nadia gets a job that will pay her bills and give her time to work on her novel. You get someone around who sees you as more than just a bank account. And I get to spend my remaining time watching my grandson fall in love with exactly the kind of woman he deserves. The offer hangs in the air between them, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Mr. Morrison, Nadia says carefully, I can't accept charity. It's not charity, it's a job. A real job with real responsibilities and real pay. You'd be earning every penny. His expression grows serious. But I won't lie to you, dear. Part of the reason I'm offering is selfish. I want to see Blake happy before I go. And you make him happy in a way I haven't seen in years. Nadia looks at Blake, sees the hope and fear warring in his expression. 6 months. 6 months to figure out if this thing between them is real or just the aftermath of an emotionally charged day. 6 months to see if she can belong in his world without losing herself. 6 months to fall completely, irrevocably in love with a man who could break her heart without even trying. I need to think about it, she says finally. Of course, William says. Take all the time you need. Blake, why don't you drive Nadia home? Give you both a chance to talk without an old man interfering. As they leave the library, Nadia can feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Stay or go. Safety or risk. The life she's built carefully, brick by brick, or the chance at something that could be extraordinary. But as Blake helps her into his car, as she catches the scent of his cologne and feels the warmth of his hand on hers, she realizes the choice has already been made. She's going to say yes. Because for the first time in her life, she wants to be brave. 3 weeks later, Nadia wakes up in a bed that costs more than her old apartment's yearly rent, and for the first time in 15 years, she doesn't immediately start worrying about money. The morning light is streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what Blake calls the Blue Room, but which she started thinking of as home. Her laptop is open on the antique writing desk, displaying the biography she's been working on, William's story, the Foundation's history, the legacy of a family that's touched more lives than they'll ever know. It's good work. Important work. The kind of writing that matters. But that's not why she's smiling as she stretches in the impossibly soft sheets. She's smiling because she can hear Blake in the kitchen downstairs, probably burning whatever he's attempting to cook for breakfast, probably cursing under his breath in that way that makes her want to kiss him until he forgets why he was frustrated. 3 weeks of this. 3 weeks of waking up knowing he's close by, of falling asleep to the sound of his voice as he reads architectural journals aloud because he knows it helps her sleep. 3 weeks of the most perfect, terrifying, wonderful time of her life. She's in love with him. Completely, stupidly, irrevocably in love. And the scariest part? She's starting to think he might love her back. Nadia. Blake's voice echoes up the stairs, followed by what sounds suspiciously like a smoke alarm. I need backup down here. She laughs, throwing on one of his old MIT sweatshirts over her pajamas. It's become her uniform in the mornings, his clothes, which are too big and smell like him and make her feel like she belongs somewhere. The kitchen is indeed a disaster zone. Blake is standing over the stove, hair messed up, wearing nothing but pajama pants and a look of complete bewilderment as he stares at what used to be eggs. I followed the recipe exactly, he says without turning around. I don't understand how they turned into, whatever this is. You followed a recipe for scrambled eggs? She moves to stand beside him, peering into the pan at what looks like yellow rubber. Blake, you don't need a recipe for scrambled eggs. You do if you've never made them before. She stares at him. You've never made scrambled eggs? I've never made anything before, he admits, looking embarrassed. We always had Maria, or before that, the cook at boarding school. I can design a building that can withstand a 9.0 earthquake, but apparently I can't handle breakfast. There's something so endearing about his complete domestic helplessness that her heart does a little flip. Come here, she says, moving to the refrigerator. Let me show you. What follows is the kind of scene that belongs in a romantic comedy. Her standing behind him, her hands over his as she guides him through the simple process of cracking eggs, whisking them, heating butter in a clean pan. He's a terrible student, too distracted by the way she feels pressed against his back, the way her hair tickles his shoulder when she leans around him to adjust the temperature. You're not paying attention, she says, laughing as he turns in her arms instead of watching the eggs. I'm paying attention to the important things, he murmurs, kissing her forehead. The eggs are perfect this time, fluffy, creamy, exactly the way they should be. They eat them standing at the kitchen counter, Blake's arm around her waist, both of them marveling at this simple domestic moment that feels more precious than all the fancy dinners in the world. I have a meeting with the hospital board today, Blake says, stealing a bite from her plate. Want to come with me? To a hospital board meeting? It's about the new children's wing design. I thought you might want to see how the foundation money gets put to work. He pauses, suddenly uncertain. Unless you're too busy with the biography. I'd love to come, she says, and means it. Over the past 3 weeks, she's watched Blake throw himself into this project with a passion that takes her breath away. He stays up late sketching designs, researching new materials, consulting with doctors and child psychologists to make sure every detail serves the young patients who will use the space. It's not the work of a man who's just going through the motions. It's the work of someone who genuinely cares, who wants to make a difference. Good, he says, relief evident in his voice. I like having you there. You ask better questions than I do. I ask different questions. Better ones, he insists. Like asking whether the play areas will be visible from the patient rooms so kids can see other children having fun. I never would have thought of that. That's because you think like an engineer. I think like someone who spent a lot of time in hospitals as a kid. The reminder of her childhood, of Malin's surgery, of how different their worlds were before William's foundation brought them together, creates a momentary shadow between them. But Blake just kisses her temple and says, that's why we make a good team. A good team. The words settle into her chest like a warm glow, because that's exactly what they've become over these past weeks. Partners in ways she never expected. After breakfast, she helps him pick out a tie for the meeting, navy blue with tiny silver that brings out his eyes, and he helps her choose which notebook to bring, as if the decision matters, as if her opinion is important. These small rituals have become the foundation of their days together. Blake brings her coffee in bed every morning, always in the same blue mug that belonged to his grandmother. She reads him passages from whatever book she's working on while he sketches building designs. They take evening walks around the property, Blake pointing out architectural details of the house while she makes up stories about the people who might have lived there. It's domestic and comfortable, and so far removed from the dramatic romance she'd imagined that sometimes she forgets how this all started. Sometimes she forgets that she's technically an employee, that there's a contract with an end date, that this beautiful bubble they've created has to burst eventually. The hospital meeting goes better than expected. The board loves Blake's designs, especially his idea for rooms that can transform from medical spaces to home-like environments with the flip of a switch. Nadia watches him present his vision. Walls that display soothing nature scenes, ceiling panels that can simulate sky, sound systems that can play anything from lullabies to ocean waves, and sees the passion burning in his eyes. How did you think of all this? Dr. Martinez, the head of pediatrics, asks. Blake glances at Nadia before answering. I had help. Someone who understood what it's like to be a scared kid in a sterile hospital room. The acknowledgement, the easy way he includes her in his success, makes her chest tight with emotion. This is what partnership looks like, she realizes. Not just the romantic part, but the way they've started to see the world through each other's eyes. After the meeting, they drive to the construction site so Blake can check on the progress of another project, a low-income housing development that's been his passion project for the past 2 years. Most people don't know about this one, he says as they walk through the half-finished buildings. It's not Morrison Industries' most profitable venture. But it's important to you. Housing shouldn't be a luxury, he says simply. Everyone deserves a safe place to call home. She watches him interact with the construction workers, sees how they respect him not just as the boss's grandson, but as someone who understands their craft. He knows their names, asks about their families, listens when they suggest improvements to his designs. This is the Blake the world doesn't see, not the billionaire playboy or the tortured architect, but a man who genuinely cares about making people's lives better. What qualities do you think are most important in a partner? Do you believe Blake and Nadia are truly compatible, or are they still in the honeymoon phase? Share your thoughts below. I love you, she says suddenly, the words tumbling out before she can stop them. Blake goes very still. They're standing on the roof of the building, the Seattle skyline spread out before them, the afternoon sun turning everything golden. What did you say? He asks quietly. I love you, she repeats, her heart hammering against her ribs. I know it's crazy, I know it's too soon, I know this whole situation is insane, but I love you, Blake. I love the way you care about things, the way you see the world, the way you make me want to be braver than I am. For a moment, he just stares at her, his expression unreadable. Then he's kissing her, desperate and fierce, his hands tangling in her hair. I love you too, he murmurs against her lips. God, Nadia, I love you so much it scares me. They hold each other on that rooftop, the city spread out below them, and for a perfect moment everything feels possible. The future stretches ahead, bright and full of promise, and she can see it all, waking up next to him for years to come, building something real and lasting together, maybe even wearing that ring for real someday. Move in with me, Blake says suddenly. I mean really move in. Not just staying in the guest room, but move in. With me. My room, my bed, my life. The invitation hangs between them, loaded with implications. Moving into his room would change everything. It would make this real in a way that can't be undone. Blake. I know it's fast, he says quickly. I know we haven't been doing this long, but it feels right. You feel right. Like you belong here. Like you belong with me. She looks into his eyes, sees the vulnerability there, the hope and fear all tangled together. 3 weeks ago, she was a struggling writer who couldn't pay her rent. Now she's in love with a man who wants to share his life with her. Okay, she says, and watches his face light up like Christmas morning. Okay. Okay, I'll move in with you. Really move in. That night, they move her things from the blue room to Blake's suite. It doesn't take long. She still doesn't have much beyond her clothes and her laptop and a few books. But Blake treats each item like it's precious, finding the perfect spot for her jewelry box on his dresser, clearing half his closet for her clothes, making space on his nightstand for her books. This is yours now, he says, wrapping his arms around her as they stand in the doorway of what is now their bedroom. All of it. For as long as you want it. What if I want it forever? She asks, the question slipping out before she can stop it. Then forever it is, he says simply, and kisses her like it's a promise. They make love that night with a tenderness that takes her breath away, Blake worshipping her body like she's something sacred, whispering words of love and devotion against her skin. Afterward, she lies in his arms, listening to his heartbeat, feeling more at peace than she has in years. Blake, she murmurs against his chest. What happens when the 6 months are up? When the biography is finished? She can feel him tense slightly beneath her. We'll figure it out, he says after a moment. Whatever you want to do, whatever will make you happy. I just want to be part of it. It's not really an answer, but it's enough for now. Enough to let her drift off to sleep in his arms, feeling safe and loved and perfectly content. But if she were more awake, if she were paying closer attention, she might have noticed the way Blake's breathing changed when she asked about the future. The way his arms tightened around her, like he was afraid she might disappear. She might have wondered why he didn't give her a straight answer. She might have realized that Blake Morrison, despite all his declarations of love, still hasn't figured out how to tell her the truth about what happens when fairy tales collide with reality. The next morning, Nadia is sitting in William's room, reading him the latest chapter of the biography, when his lawyer arrives unexpectedly. Mr. Morrison, the stern-faced man says, his briefcase clicking open with military precision. We need to discuss the Foundation's transition plan. The board is getting anxious about the timeline. William waves a dismissive hand. Can't it wait, Richard? I'm listening to my granddaughter-in-law read me stories. I'm not his granddaughter-in-law, Nadia corrects automatically, but she's smiling as she says it. Yet, William says with a wink that makes her blush. Richard Thornton doesn't look amused. Sir, with respect, the foundation manages over $2 billion in assets. The board needs to know who will be taking over operations when the time comes. Blake will handle it, of course. Will he? Richard's voice carries a note of skepticism that makes Nadia look up from her notebook. Because according to the conversations I've had with him, he's not interested in running the foundation. He wants to focus on his architectural work. William's expression tightens. He'll come around. Sir, forgive me, but we need more than he'll come around. The foundation requires a full-time commitment. Someone who can dedicate themselves entirely to the work. Blake has made it clear that he considers the construction company and his architectural projects his primary responsibilities. Then he'll hire someone to help him. Like who? Richard asks pointedly, and Nadia suddenly feels like she's intruding on something private, something important. I should go, she says, starting to gather her things. No, stay, William says firmly. Your family now. This concerns you too. But Richard is already pulling out a thick folder, his expression grave. Mr. Morrison, there's something else we need to discuss. About the foundation's future and about Blake's engagement. Nadia goes very still. What about his engagement? Richard glances between her and William, clearly uncomfortable. I was under the impression that Blake was engaged to be married. That there would be a Mrs. Morrison to help with the foundation's social obligations. There will be, William says, looking at Nadia with fond certainty. But sir, Richard continues, his voice careful, the board has been expecting an announcement. A formal engagement, a wedding date. The foundation's social calendar for the next 2 years has been planned around Blake's marriage. The annual gala, the donor recognition events, the international charity conferences, all of it assumes he'll have a wife to co-host these functions. The words hit Nadia like ice water. The board is expecting Blake to get married? Not just expecting, Richard says. Planning on it. The foundation's social infrastructure has been built around the assumption that there will be a Mrs. Morrison to take on the ceremonial duties that Mrs. William Morrison used to handle. William's face has gone pale. I never told them he had to get married. You told them he was engaged, sir. You've been telling them for months that he was planning to propose to someone special. The board has made commitments based on that information. Nadia feels like the world is tilting sideways. What kind of commitments? Richard opens his folder, pulls out a schedule that's clearly been months in the making. The spring gala is in 6 weeks. We've already confirmed that Blake and his fiancée will be hosting. The donor materials that went out last month specifically mentioned meeting the future Mrs. Morrison. We have RSVPs from over 500 people. Oh God, Nadia whispers. The International Children's Charity Conference in London is in 3 months. Blake is scheduled to give the keynote address with his wife. The promotional materials have already been printed and distributed worldwide. Each word feels like a hammer blow. Nadia can see the scope of the problem now, can see how William's well-meaning lies have created a web of expectations that's going to trap them all. And then there's the matter of the foundation's leadership structure, Richard continues relentlessly. The board voted last month to restructure the organization around a co-leadership model. Blake as president, his wife as executive director of social programs. It's a done deal, sir. Contracts have been signed, staff has been hired based on this structure. Nadia stands up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need some air. Nadia, wait, William starts, but she's already moving toward the door, her heart pounding so hard she can barely breathe. She makes it to the garden before the panic attack hits. Sitting on a stone bench surrounded by William's prize-winning roses, she tries to process what she's just learned. The foundation, the charity that saved her sister's life, that's helped hundreds of other children, has been restructured around the assumption that Blake will marry her. Not just marry someone, but marry her specifically, because she's the imaginary fiancée that William has been talking about for months. 500 people are expecting to meet her at a gala in 6 weeks. An international conference has been planned around her participation. Staff have been hired to work under her direction. And Blake. Blake has known about all of this. He has to have known. There you are. Blake's voice comes from behind her, warm and concerned. Maria said you ran out of Grandpa's room looking upset. What's wrong? She turns to look at him, this man she loves, this man who's been lying to her for 3 weeks. When were you going to tell me? She asks quietly. Something flickers in his expression. Tell you what? About the gala. About the conference. About the foundation being restructured around me becoming your wife. Blake goes very still. Nadia. You knew, she says, and it's not a question. You've known this whole time that your grandfather told the board we were engaged. You've known that they've been planning events around our marriage, hiring staff, making commitments. And you didn't tell me. I was going to tell you. When? The question comes out sharper than she intended. When were you going to mention that I'm already committed to co-hosting a gala for 500 people? When were you planning to let me know that there's an entire charity conference in London that's been organized around my participation? Blake sits down beside her on the bench, but she shifts away from him. It wasn't supposed to get this complicated, he says quietly. When Grandpa first started telling people about you, it was just stories. I thought it was harmless. Harmless. She stares at him. Blake, they've restructured a $2 billion foundation around me. How is that harmless? Because I was going to fix it, he says desperately. I was going to figure out how to tell everyone that things had changed, that we'd broken up or something. I never meant for it to go this far. But it has gone this far. And now what? Now I'm supposed to pretend to be your wife for the rest of your grandfather's life? Now I'm supposed to run a charity I know nothing about. You wouldn't be pretending, Blake says, and there's something in his voice that makes her heart stop. Nadia, I love you. What we have is real. We could make this work. By forcing me into a life I never chose. She stands up, needing distance between them. Blake, I fell in love with you. I didn't sign up to become the face of your family's foundation. I didn't agree to spend my life hosting galas and giving speeches and being responsible for other people's charitable donations. But you're perfect for it, he says, standing too. You understand what the foundation means to families like yours. You could make a real difference. That's not the point. The words explode out of her, all the panic and betrayal she's been holding back. The point is that you made this decision for me. You and your grandfather, you decided that I would be perfect for this role, and you never asked me what I wanted. Blake's face has gone white. Nadia, please. I know this is overwhelming, but we can figure it out together. I love you. Doesn't that matter? And that's when she realizes the truth that's been lurking under all the perfect moments, all the domestic bliss, all the declarations of love. You don't love me, Blake, she says quietly. You love the idea of me. You love having someone who fits into the life you need to live. Just like your grandfather's stories about the perfect fiancé, I'm not a person to you, I'm a solution to a problem. That's not true. Isn't it? She's crying now, but she doesn't care. You hired me to pretend to be your fiancé, and now you want me to actually become your fiancé. How is that different from what we started with? How is that real? Blake looks like she's slapped him. Because I love you. Because what we have together is real, even if how it started was complicated. What we have, she says, is 3 weeks of playing house in a fantasy world. But the real world doesn't go away just because we're in love, Blake. And in the real world, I'm not the person you need me to be. You are, he says desperately. You're exactly the person I need you to be. And that's when she knows, with complete certainty, that this is over. Because she doesn't want to be the person someone needs her to be. She wants to be loved for who she is, complicated and flawed and real. She wants to be chosen, not cast in a role. I can't do this, she whispers. Nadia, please. I can't be your solution, Blake. I can't be the answer to your grandfather's prayers or the foundation's needs or your own loneliness. I can't be responsible for everyone else's happiness. She starts walking back toward the house, but Blake follows her. Where are you going? To pack, she says without turning around. To go home. This is your home. She stops, turns to look at him one last time. Standing there in the garden where they've taken so many evening walks, where he's told her he loves her, where she's felt more at home than anywhere in her life, he looks lost and desperate and completely broken. And she loves him. God help her, she loves him so much it's tearing her apart to walk away. But loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for them. It doesn't mean becoming someone you're not to make them happy. No, she says quietly. It's not. It never was. As she walks away from him, as she leaves behind the most perfect 3 weeks of her life, she can hear him calling her name. But she doesn't look back. Because if she looks back, she'll stay. And if she stays, she'll lose herself completely. Even if it means losing him. Nadia is throwing clothes into her suitcase with shaking hands when Blake appears in the doorway of what used to be their bedroom. His face is ravaged, his hair wild from running his fingers through it, and for a moment she almost weakens. Almost drops everything and runs to him. Almost. Don't do this, he says, his voice raw. Please, Nadia. Don't leave like this. She doesn't look at him. Can't look at him. If she looks at him, she'll see the pain in his eyes and remember how it felt to wake up in his arms this morning, how safe and loved and perfect everything seemed just hours ago. I have to. She grabs her laptop, her notebooks, the few personal items that have made this room feel like home. Everything else, the expensive clothes he's bought her, the jewelry, the life they've built together, she leaves behind. We can fix this, Blake says desperately. The foundation thing, the gala, all of it, we can figure it out. I'll tell them the truth, I'll cancel everything. And destroy your grandfather's foundation in the process? She finally looks at him, and the devastation on his face nearly breaks her resolve. Blake, there are contracts. Commitments. 500 people expecting to meet your fiancée in 6 weeks. An entire charity conference built around our marriage. I don't care about any of that. Yes, you do. She zips the suitcase closed with more force than necessary. And you should. That foundation has saved hundreds of lives. It's your grandfather's legacy, his life's work. You can't just destroy it because you fell in love with the wrong person. You're not the wrong person, he says fiercely. You're the only person. You're everything I've ever wanted. The words hit her like physical blows, but she forces herself to stand firm. I'm everything you needed, Blake. There's a difference. She moves toward the door, but he blocks her path. 3 weeks ago, you said you wanted to be brave, he says, desperation making his voice crack. You said I made you want to take risks. What happened to that? I realized the difference between being brave and being stupid. She looks up at him, memorizing his face because she knows this is the last time she'll see him like this, unguarded, vulnerable, completely hers. Being brave is choosing love even when it's scary. Being stupid is losing yourself for someone else's happiness. You wouldn't be losing yourself. Wouldn't I? She sets down her suitcase, suddenly needing him to understand. Blake, in 3 weeks I went from being an independent woman struggling to make it as a writer to being someone whose entire identity is wrapped up in being your girlfriend. I wake up in your bed, I wear your clothes, I eat food you pay for, I work on projects you've given me. When people ask what I do, I say I'm working on your family's biography. When was the last time I talked about my own writing? My own dreams? Blake's face goes pale as her words sink in. I don't even know who I am anymore when I'm not with you, she continues, her voice breaking. And that's not love, Blake. That's dependency. That's me disappearing into your life because it's easier than building my own. That's not what I wanted, he whispers. But it's what happened. She picks up her suitcase again. And if I stay, if I become your wife and co-run your foundation and host your galas, it'll only get worse. I'll become the woman you need me to be instead of the woman I actually am. This time when she moves toward the door, he steps aside. But his voice follows her down the hall. What about us? What about everything we've built together? She stops at the top of the stairs, her back to him, tears streaming down her face. We built a fantasy, Blake. A beautiful, perfect fantasy. But fantasies aren't real, and they can't last. The last thing she hears as she leaves the Morrison mansion is the sound of something breaking, glass shattering against a wall, Blake's anguish given physical form. She doesn't look back. The Uber driver keeps glancing at her in the rearview mirror as they drive through Seattle, probably wondering why a woman carrying a designer suitcase is crying like her world has ended. She wants to tell him that's exactly what's happened. Her world has ended, or at least the part of it that mattered. Her phone is buzzing incessantly. Text after text from Blake, from William, even from Maria. She doesn't read them. Can't read them. Instead, she stares out the window at the city that felt like home 3 weeks ago and now feels like foreign territory. When they pull up to her old apartment building, the one she never officially moved out of because some part of her always knew this moment would come, she tips the driver with the last of her cash and drags her suitcase up 3 flights of stairs to a place that no longer feels like home either. The apartment is exactly as she left it, sparse, shabby, the polar opposite of the Morrison mansion. Her laptop sits on the cheap IKEA desk where she used to write rejection letters and worry about rent. Her bed is unmade from the last night she spent here, the sheets she couldn't afford to replace still twisted from restless sleep. 3 weeks ago, this was her life. Now it feels like a museum exhibit of the person she used to be. She sits on the edge of the bed and finally allows herself to check her phone. Blake, please come back. We can talk about this. Blake, I know you're angry, but don't throw away what we have over a misunderstanding. Blake, I love you. That's the only thing that matters. William, my dear girl, please don't let an old man's mistakes destroy your happiness. Maria, Mija, Blake is falling apart. Whatever happened, it can be fixed. And then, at the bottom of the list, a text from a number she doesn't recognize. Unknown, Ms. Chun, this is Richard Thornton, the Morrison Foundation's legal counsel. We need to discuss the situation with the upcoming gala. Please call me at your earliest convenience. The text sends ice through her veins. It's starting already. The professional consequences, the legal complications, the public humiliation that's going to rain down on all of them. She's about to turn off the phone when it rings. Blake's name appears on the screen, and despite everything, her heart lurches. She answers without thinking. Nadia, thank God. His voice is rough, desperate. Where are you? I've been driving around for hours. I'm at my apartment. I'll be right there. No. The word comes out sharper than she intended. Blake, don't. Please. We said everything we needed to say. We didn't say anything. You ran away before we could actually talk. There's nothing to talk about. She's crying again, silent tears that make her voice thick. The foundation needs a co-host for the gala. You need a wife who can handle the social obligations. I can't be that person. I don't need you to be that person. I just need you. But they do need me to be that person. Your grandfather's lawyer is already texting me about the gala. How long before the press gets wind of this? How long before everyone knows that Blake Morrison's mysterious fiancée is actually a broke writer he hired to fool his dying grandfather? The silence on the other end of the line tells her everything she needs to know. Oh my God, she whispers. The press. Blake, what happens when this comes out? What happens to the foundation when people find out the whole thing was a lie? It wasn't a lie, he says desperately. Not the important parts. What we feel for each other, that's real. But everything else is a lie. Our engagement, our relationship, the reason I'm living in your house, all of it started as a deception. And now there are hundreds of people expecting me to be something I'm not, and when they find out the truth. She can see it all now, the scandal, the headlines, the damage to William's legacy. Blake, this is going to destroy everything your grandfather built. We won't let it. How can we stop it? The foundation's board thinks we're engaged. The gala attendees are expecting to meet your fiancé. The international conference has promotional materials with my name on them. What are we supposed to do, fake a wedding? Another silence. A longer one. Blake. Her voice is barely a whisper. What are we supposed to do? I don't know, he admits, and the defeat in his voice breaks her heart all over again. I don't know how to fix this. And that's when she realizes the full scope of what's happening. This isn't just about their relationship. This isn't just about two people falling in love under complicated circumstances. This is about a charitable foundation that depends on public trust, about donors who give millions of dollars based on the Morrison family's reputation, about William's legacy and the hundreds of children who won't get help if the foundation falls apart. I have to go, she says. Nadia, wait. She hangs up and immediately turns off the phone. Then she sits in the silence of her empty apartment and tries to figure out how everything went so wrong so fast. Have you ever been in a situation where love wasn't enough to overcome the obstacles? Sometimes the right person can come at the wrong time. What would you do in Nadia's position? Let me know in the comments. She doesn't sleep that night. Instead, she sits at her desk and does what she always does when the world becomes too much to bear, she writes. Not the Morrison family biography, not the foundation story, but her own. The story of a 13-year-old girl who became a mother overnight, who spent 15 years building walls to protect herself and her sister, who let those walls down for 3 weeks and fell so hard she forgot who she was supposed to be. She writes about Blake, about the way he looked at her like she was something precious, about the morning routine they developed, about feeling like she belonged somewhere for the first time in her life. She writes about William, about Maria, about the library and the kitchen and the garden where she fell in love. She writes until her fingers ache and her eyes burn, until the sun starts to rise over Seattle and she realizes she's written nearly 10,000 words about the best and worst 3 weeks of her life. When she's done, she reads it over, and for the first time in months, she knows it's good. Raw and honest and real in a way her writing has never been before. The kind of writing that comes from having your heart broken and your world shattered and somehow finding the words to make sense of it all. Her phone has been buzzing all morning. She turned it back on an hour ago, but she's been ignoring it. Now, finally, she checks the messages. Most of them are from Blake, increasingly desperate as the hours pass. A few from William, gentle and heartbroken. Several from Maria, alternating between worry and gentle scolding. But it's the last message that makes her blood run cold. Richard Thornton, Ms. Chun, I understand you've left the Morrison residence. The foundation board is meeting this afternoon to discuss the situation. Your presence is required. Required. Not requested. Required. She stares at the message, understanding finally sinking in. She's not just Blake's ex-girlfriend. She's not just a woman who fell in love with the wrong man at the wrong time. She's a co-conspirator in a deception that could destroy a multi-billion-dollar charity. She's legally culpable for whatever happens next. And she has no idea how to get out of it. The Morrison Foundation's offices are everything Nadia expected: sleek, modern, intimidating. The kind of place where serious people make serious decisions about serious money. She feels completely out of place in her jeans and sweater, but it's better than wearing one of the expensive outfits Blake bought her. Richard Thornton is waiting for her in a conference room that's larger than her entire apartment. He's not alone. There are 6 other people around the table, all of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Ms. Chun, Richard says, standing as she enters. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. She takes the chair he indicates, hyper-aware of everyone watching her, judging her, probably wondering how this obviously unsuitable woman ended up at the center of their crisis. I suppose you're wondering why we've asked you here, Richard continues. I assume it's about the gala, she says, trying to keep her voice steady. Among other things. He opens a folder and pulls out what looks like a contract. Ms. Chun, are you aware that the Morrison Foundation has spent approximately $300,000 in the past month on events and promotional materials that specifically mention your engagement to Blake Morrison? Her stomach drops. $300,000? Catering deposits for the gala, promotional materials for the London conference, staff salaries for the team we hired to coordinate your social calendar. The foundation has made significant financial commitments based on the assumption that you would be fulfilling certain obligations. I never agreed to fulfill any obligations, she says, panic rising in her chest. Perhaps not explicitly, Richard agrees. But you did accept payment for services related to the Morrison family, did you not? You've been living in the Morrison residence, receiving compensation for biographical work, presenting yourself as Blake Morrison's romantic partner. She realizes where this is going, and it's worse than she imagined. We're not trying to be unreasonable, says a woman at the far end of the table, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, according to her nameplate. But the foundation has a fiduciary responsibility to its donors. We can't simply absorb a $300,000 loss because of a personal relationship that didn't work out. What are you saying? Nadia asks, though she's afraid she already knows. We're saying, Richard replies, that the Morrison Foundation requires you to fulfill your contractual obligations through the completion of the Spring Gala and the London Conference. After that, We can discuss a mutual termination of the arrangement. Contractual obligations? She stares at him. I never signed any contract. Richard slides a document across the table to her. Your biographical work agreement, signed 3 weeks ago. Section 4, subsection C clearly states that you agree to participate in foundation-related social events as required. Nadia reads the clause, her heart sinking with each word. It's buried in the middle of legal jargon she didn't pay attention to when she signed it, too overwhelmed by everything happening to read the fine print carefully. This doesn't say anything about pretending to be engaged to Blake Morrison, she says desperately. It doesn't have to, Dr. Hendricks replies. The board voted to restructure the foundation around a co-leadership model specifically because Mr. William Morrison assured us that Blake would be married shortly. That restructuring is based on your participation, whether or not a legal marriage takes place. The room is spinning. Nadia grips the edge of the table, trying to process what they're telling her. You want me to fake an engagement for the next 4 months, she says slowly. We want you to honor your commitments to the foundation, Richard corrects. How you and Blake choose to characterize your relationship is your business, but the foundation's social obligations must be met. And if I refuse? The silence that follows is answer enough. Ms. Chun, Richard says carefully, the foundation has grounds to pursue legal action for breach of contract and recovery of funds already expended. We would prefer not to go that route, but you will if I don't cooperate. We have a responsibility to our donors and the children we serve. $300,000 could fund medical care for dozens of families. We can't simply write it off. Nadia closes her eyes, feeling trapped in a nightmare she can't wake up from. They're not just asking her to pretend to be Blake's fiancée, they're threatening to sue her if she doesn't. They're holding her legally responsible for the financial consequences of William's lies. And the worst part is, they're right. The foundation does have a responsibility to its donors. Children do need medical care. She can't be the reason a charity fails. How long? She asks quietly. The gala is in 6 weeks. The London conference is 3 months after that. Call it 4 months total. 4 months of pretending to love Blake Morrison. 4 months of playing a role that will destroy her if she's not careful. 4 months of living a lie that gets bigger and more complicated every day. I need to think about it, she says. Of course, Richard replies. But Ms. Chen? The gala invitations have already gone out. The donor materials have been distributed. The foundation's reputation is at stake. We need an answer by tomorrow morning. As she leaves the office, her phone buzzes with a text from Blake. Blake, I just heard about the board meeting. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. She stares at the message, thinking about everything that's led to this moment. The coffee shop where they met, the desperate lie that started it all, the 3 weeks of perfect happiness that made her forget how complicated the world really is. She thinks about William, dying in his hospital bed, believing his grandson has found love. She thinks about the foundation, about all the children who need medical care, about the $300,000 that could save lives. She thinks about Blake, who fell in love with her and never meant to trap her in a web of obligations and expectations. And she thinks about herself, about the woman who spent 15 years taking care of everyone else, who finally found something for herself and watched it turn into another responsibility she can't escape. Her phone buzzes again. Blake, I'll fix this. I promise. I'll find a way to make it right. But as she walks through the Seattle streets toward her empty apartment, toward a decision that will change everything, she knows there's no way to make this right. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Some lies, once told, can't be taken back. And some love stories, no matter how much the people in them want them to work, are doomed from the very beginning. Nadia agrees to the board's terms the next morning, not because she wants to, but because she doesn't have a choice. The contract is ironclad, the financial consequences devastating, and the foundation's mission too important to sacrifice for her broken heart. But agreeing and actually doing it are two different things. The first week back at the Morrison mansion is pure torture. She moves back into the blue room. She can't bring herself to share Blake's bed again, not when everything between them feels like a performance now. He doesn't argue, though she can see the hurt in his eyes every time he passes the closed door of what used to be their bedroom. They're polite to each other. Carefully, painfully polite. Blake brings her coffee in the morning, but he leaves it outside her door instead of bringing it to her bedside. She joins him for meals, but they talk about safe topics, the weather, current events, anything but the gala planning that consumes their days. The worst part is how easily they slip back into the roles they're supposed to play. When the event coordinator comes by to discuss seating arrangements, Nadia sits beside Blake and smiles and nods in all the right places. When the photographer arrives to take engagement photos for the foundation's newsletter, she lets Blake put his arm around her and leans into him like she's supposed to. But inside, she's dying a little more each day. "You look beautiful," Blake says after the photographer leaves, and there's something desperate in his voice, like he's trying to bridge the chasm between them with compliments. "Thank you," she replies automatically, then immediately excuses herself to go work on the biography. She's been throwing herself into the writing, partly because it's what she's being paid to do and partly because it's the only time she feels like herself anymore. William's story, the foundation's history, the legacy of a family that saved hundreds of lives. It's important work, meaningful work, and it reminds her that there's more to this situation than her broken heart. But even that refuge is complicated now. How do you write honestly about a man whose well-meaning lies have trapped you in a nightmare? How do you document a love story between William and his late wife when your own love story has turned into a legal obligation? "Nadia," William says one afternoon as she sits beside his bed, laptop open, struggling to find words that feel true. "You're not happy." It's not a question. She looks up from her screen to find him watching her with those sharp blue eyes that see everything. "I'm fine," she says automatically. "Child, I may be dying, but I'm not blind. You look like someone attending your own funeral." The words hit too close to home. That's exactly what this feels like, attending the funeral of the woman she was before she fell in love with Blake Morrison. "It's complicated," she says finally. "It's my fault," William corrects gently. "I put you both in an impossible situation because I was a foolish old man who wanted to see his grandson happy before I died. You meant well. The road to hell is paved with good intentions," he says with a bitter laugh. "I've destroyed the best thing that ever happened to Blake because I couldn't keep my mouth shut." Nadia closes her laptop, turns to really look at him. He's gotten frilier in the past week, the stress of the situation clearly taking its toll. "Mr. Morrison, William," she corrects herself. "You didn't destroy anything. Blake and we were never going to work long term. We're too different." "Are you?" His eyes twinkle with something that might be mischief if the circumstances were different. "Because from where I'm sitting, you both look exactly the same, miserable, stubborn, and too proud to admit you're still in love with each other." "It doesn't matter if we're in love," she says quietly. "Love isn't enough when everything else is wrong." "Everything else like what?" "Like the fact that I don't belong in this world. Like the fact that our entire relationship is built on a lie. Like the fact that I'm only here now because your board threatened to sue me if I left." William is quiet for a long moment, processing her words. "The board threatened you?" he asks finally, his voice dangerously soft. "They have a responsibility to the foundation," Nadia says quickly. "I signed a contract. There are financial obligations." "Bullshit." The word comes out sharp, angry, nothing like William's usual gentle tone. "Richard Thornton is a lawyer, not the keeper of moral obligations. The board serves at my pleasure, not the other way around." "William, please don't make this worse than it already is." "Worse?" He struggles to sit up straighter in bed, his face flushed with indignation. "Child, they're holding you hostage with legal threats over a situation I created. How could it possibly be worse? Because if the foundation falls apart, children don't get medical care. Because if there's a scandal, all the good work you've done for 60 years gets overshadowed by gossip about your grandson's fake engagement. Because sometimes doing the right thing means sacrificing what you want." The words pour out of her, all the practical reasons she's been using to justify staying, to convince herself that this is noble instead of just pathetic. "And what do you want, Nadia?" William asks gently. The question stops her cold. What does she want? She's been so focused on what she should do, what's expected of her, what will cause the least damage, that she's forgotten to ask herself what she actually wants. "I want." She starts, then stops, surprised by the tears that suddenly threaten. "I want to go back to 3 weeks ago and make different choices. I want to meet Blake in a normal way, fall in love with him without all these complications. I want to know if what we had was real or just the result of an impossible situation. It was real, William says with absolute certainty. I've watched that boy fall in love, and it was the most real thing I've ever seen. Then why does it feel like I'm dying inside? Because you're not fighting for it, he says simply. You're accepting a situation that makes you both miserable because you think it's the noble thing to do. But nobility without happiness is just martyrdom, child. And martyrs don't save anyone, they just make everyone around them feel guilty. His words hit her like a physical blow. Is that what she's doing? Playing the martyr instead of fighting for what she wants? I don't know how to fight for it, she admits. I don't know how to separate what I want from what everyone else needs. Then figure it out, William says firmly. Because I'm not going to die watching my grandson waste his life on a woman who's given up on their love before it had a chance to grow. After she leaves William's room, Nadia walks through the mansion like a ghost, seeing everything and feeling nothing. The library where Blake first told her he loved her. The kitchen where they cooked breakfast together. The garden where she fell apart and walked away from the best thing that ever happened to her. She finds Blake in his study, hunched over architectural drawings, his hair messed up from running his fingers through it. He looks up when she enters, hope flaring in his eyes before he carefully banks it. How was the session with Grandpa? He asks. He thinks we're both idiots, she says, sinking into the chair across from his desk. He's probably right. Blake sets down his pencil, studies her face. Nadia, I need you to know that I'm working on this. The board situation, the contracts, all of it. I won't let you be trapped here against your will. What if I'm not trapped? The words come out before she can stop them. What if I'm just scared? Blake goes very still. Scared of what? Of admitting that I love you so much it terrifies me. Of acknowledging that these past 3 weeks were the happiest of my life, even though they were built on a lie. Of accepting that maybe some lies are worth telling if they lead to something true. She's crying now, silent tears that she doesn't bother to wipe away. I've spent 15 years taking care of everyone else, she continues. Making sure Mei Lin was okay, making sure bills got paid, making sure I never needed anyone too much because needing people is dangerous. And then I met you, and suddenly I wanted to need someone. I wanted to be taken care of for once instead of always being the caretaker. Blake is staring at her like she's speaking a foreign language. But that scared me, she says. Because what if you got tired of taking care of me? What if I became just another responsibility, another person who needed something from you? What if you realized I wasn't worth it? Nadia. He starts, but she holds up a hand. So when I found out about the board, about the gala, about all the ways our relationship had become entangled with your family's obligations, it felt like proof that I was right to be scared. It felt like evidence that I was just another problem for you to solve, another role for me to play. She stands up, moves to the window that looks out over the garden. But your grandfather made me realize something today. I've been so busy protecting myself from being hurt that I never gave us a real chance. I never tried to figure out if we could build something honest together, something that belonged to us instead of to your family's expectations. Blake comes to stand behind her, close enough that she can feel the warmth of his body. What are you saying? He asks quietly. I'm saying I want to try, she says, turning to face him. Not because the board is forcing me to, not because your grandfather is dying, not because it's the practical thing to do, but because I love you, and I think you love me, and maybe that's enough to build something real on. It is enough, Blake says fiercely, reaching for her hands. Nadia, it's more than enough. I love you so much I don't know how to function without you. These past weeks, watching you pull away, feeling like I've lost you, it's been hell. You haven't lost me, she says, stepping closer to him. But we need to start over. Really start over, without the lies and the obligations and everyone else's expectations. Just you and me, figuring out what we want our life to look like. What about the gala? The foundation? The board? We'll figure it out, she says, and for the first time in weeks, she means it. But we'll figure it out together, as partners, not as people trapped in roles we never chose. Blake kisses her then, desperate and relieved and full of promise. It tastes like forgiveness and new beginnings and all the ways they're going to fight for each other from now on. I love you, he murmurs against her lips. I love you too, she replies. Now let's go tell your grandfather that we're done being idiots. But as they head toward William's room, hand in hand and hearts full of hope, neither of them notices the black sedan parked across the street from the mansion. Neither of them sees the photographer with a telephoto lens, capturing every moment of their reconciliation. Neither of them realizes that their private moment of healing is about to become very, very public. And sometimes, the worst storms come just when you think you've found your way to safety. Do you think Nadia and Blake can overcome all the obstacles stacked against them? Is love really enough when there are so many external pressures? Let me know what you think will happen next in the comments below. The scandal breaks on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before the gala. Nadia is in the kitchen making coffee. She's taken over breakfast duties from Blake, who burns everything he touches, when her phone starts buzzing incessantly. Text after text, call after call, all from numbers she doesn't recognize. Blake, she calls toward the study where he's been working on his London conference presentation. Something's wrong. He appears in the doorway just as her phone rings again. This time it's Mei-Lin, and the panic in her little sister's voice makes Nadia's blood run cold. Nadia, what the hell is going on? There are reporters outside my school asking about you and some billionaire boyfriend. They're saying you're a gold digger who trapped him with a fake pregnancy or something equally insane. What? Nadia's hand flies to her mouth. Mei-Lin, where are you? Are you safe? I'm hiding in the principal's office, but Nadia, there are photos. Really bad photos. You need to see what they're saying about you. Blake is already pulling out his phone, his face going white as he scrolls through whatever he's found. Fuck, he breathes, then shows her the screen. The headline makes her physically ill, Billionaire's Fake Fiancée, How a Struggling Writer Conned Her Way into the Morrison Fortune. Below it are photos, dozens of them. Her leaving the foundation offices looking upset. Blake chasing after her in the garden the day she left. The two of them kissing in his study just last week, shot through the window with a telephoto lens. But it's the article text that destroys her. Asterisk sources close to the Morrison family confirm that Blake Morrison's mysterious fiancée is actually Nadia Chun, a failed writer who has been living off the Morrison fortune for months. The relationship allegedly began when Chen was hired to pose as Morrison's girlfriend to fool his dying grandfather, but sources say Chun has been blackmailing the family ever since, threatening to expose the deception unless they continue to support her lifestyle. She's been manipulating Blake from the beginning, says an unnamed Morrison Foundation board member. The whole thing is a scam to get access to the family money. She's holding the foundation hostage with legal threats. Nadia sinks into a chair, the room spinning around her. They're making me sound like a criminal. They're lying, Blake says fiercely, but his phone is ringing now too, and she can see the panic in his eyes. Nadia, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to call my publicist, the foundation's lawyers. Blake. William's voice cuts through the chaos. He's standing in the doorway in his robe and slippers, looking friendlier than ever but with steel in his eyes. Turn on the news. Channel 7. Blake grabs the remote, and suddenly their private nightmare is playing out on television. The anchor is discussing the Morrison Foundation scandal, with a kind of breathless excitement reserved for celebrity breakups and political corruption. The Morrison Foundation, which manages over $2 billion in charitable assets, is facing serious questions about financial impropriety following revelations about Blake Morrison's relationship with an unemployed writer. Sources within the foundation suggest that significant funds have been diverted to support Morrison's fake fiancée, raising concerns about donor trust and financial oversight. $2 billion, Nadia whispers. They're making it sound like I stole $2 billion. The foundation's phones have been ringing all morning, William says quietly. Donors calling to withdraw their pledges. Board members demanding emergency meetings. Richard Thornton is talking about damage control and legal action. Blake's phone buzzes with a text. He reads it and his face goes white. The board is meeting in 2 hours, he says. They want both of us there. To do what? Publicly crucify me. To find a way forward, William says firmly. Because this family doesn't run from fights, and we don't let good people get destroyed by lies and half-truths. But as they get ready for what feels like a tribunal, Nadia can't shake the feeling that some fights aren't worth winning. That sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the damage that's already been done. The Morrison Foundation's boardroom feels like a courtroom, with Nadia and Blake sitting on one side of the massive table and 8 board members arrayed against them like a jury. Richard Thornton has a stack of newspapers and printouts in front of him, all featuring variations of the same story. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, his voice grave, "we're facing the worst crisis in the Foundation's 60-year history. Donor confidence has been shattered. Our reputation is in ruins. And all because of a personal relationship that should never have involved the Foundation in the first place." Dr. Hendricks leans forward, her expression stern. "Blake, we need to understand exactly what happened here. Did you or did you not hire Ms. Chun to pose as your fiancée?" Blake's jaw tightens. The situation is more complicated than. "It's a yes or no question," another board member interrupts. "Did you hire her?" "Yes," Blake says finally. "I hired her to spend 1 hour with my grandfather. That's all it was supposed to be." "But it became more than that," Richard states. "Yes. And during this time, Ms. Chun was living in your family home, receiving payment for biographical work, and presenting herself as your romantic partner to Foundation staff and donors. She was doing legitimate work," Blake says defensively. "The biography project is real and valuable and—" "But the relationship was fake," Dr. Hendricks cuts him off. "Which means every interaction she had with donors, every photo opportunity, every mention of your engagement in Foundation materials, all of it was based on a deception." Nadia has been listening to this exchange in silence, watching Blake try to defend her, watching him take responsibility for a situation that spiraled far beyond either of their control. But as the board members dissect their relationship like it's evidence in a criminal case, something inside her snaps. "Stop," she says, her voice cutting through the accusations. "Just stop." Everyone turns to look at her, and for a moment she feels the weight of all their judgment, all their assumptions about who she is and what she's done. Then she thinks about Mei Lin, about William, about all the children the Foundation has helped over the years. She thinks about the woman she used to be, scared, defensive, always apologizing for taking up space. And she realizes she's done being that woman. "You want the truth?" she says, standing up. "Here's the truth. Yes, Blake hired me to pretend to be his fiancée for 1 hour. Yes, I took the money because I was desperate and my sister needed surgery and I didn't have any other options. And yes, what started as a lie became something real." She looks around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. "But here's what you're not talking about," she continues. "The reason Blake hired me in the first place. The reason his grandfather was so desperate to see him settle down before he died. The reason a 32-year-old man who built hospitals and designed earthquake-resistant buildings thought he needed to create a fake girlfriend to make his family happy." Blake is staring at her, probably wondering where she's going with this. Blake Morrison has spent his entire adult life sacrificing his personal happiness for this foundation, she says. He's worked 18-hour days, donated millions of his own money, and put the foundation's needs ahead of his own for years. And instead of supporting him, instead of understanding why he felt like he needed to lie to protect his grandfather's feelings, you're treating him like a criminal. Dr. Hendricks opens her mouth to speak, but Nadia isn't finished. "And me? You want to know what kind of person I am? I'm the kind of person who gave up $50,000 because I couldn't lie to a dying old man. I'm the kind of person who spent the last month working 16-hour days on a biography that tells the true story of this foundation's impact, because I believe in what you do here. I'm the kind of person who agreed to continue this charade not because I wanted to con anyone, but because I was told that children would suffer if I didn't." The room has gone completely silent. "So yes," she continues, her voice growing stronger with each word, "our relationship started as a lie. But what it became was real. Real enough that I fell in love with a man who builds hospitals for sick children. Real enough that he fell in love with a woman who spent 15 years taking care of everyone else before herself. Real enough that we're both willing to stand here and be judged by people who think love can be reduced to contracts and financial obligations." She turns to Blake, sees the pride and love shining in his eyes. "And if you think that kind of love is something to be ashamed of," she says, looking back at the board, "then maybe you don't understand what this foundation is supposed to be about in the first place." The silence that follows is deafening. Then, slowly, Richard Thornton begins to smile. "Ms. Chun," he says, "that was either the most honest thing I've heard in this room in 20 years, or the most brilliant public relations strategy I've ever witnessed." "It was the truth," she says simply. "In that case," he says, turning to the other board members, I think we need to discuss how to turn this crisis into an opportunity. The press conference is scheduled for the next day. Blake wanted to handle it alone, wanted to protect Nadia from the media circus that's been growing around their story. But she refuses to hide anymore, refuses to let other people control the narrative about her life. "We're in this together," she tells him as they prepare in the green room of the foundation's offices. "All of it. The good, the bad, and the completely insane." "Are you sure about this?" he asks, straightening his tie with nervous fingers. "Once we go out there, once we tell the whole truth, there's no going back. Everyone will know exactly how this started." "Good," she says, smoothing down her dress. Not one of the expensive outfits he bought her, but her own simple black dress that she wore to job interviews back when she was just a struggling writer. "I'm tired of lies. Even the well-meaning ones." William appears in the doorway, moving slowly but determinedly with his walker. "Ready to face the wolves." "Are you sure you should be here?" Blake asks, worry evident in his voice. "This is going to be stressful." "Son, I'm dying anyway," William says with a wicked grin. "Might as well go out with a good story." The press room is packed with reporters, cameras, and the kind of hungry energy that comes from sensing a major story. As they take their seats at the table, Blake in the middle, Nadia on his right, William on his left, she can feel the weight of dozens of eyes studying her, judging her, waiting for her to crack under pressure. Blake leans forward to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," he begins. "I know there's been a lot of speculation about my relationship with Nadia Chun and its connection to the Morrison Foundation. Today we want to set the record straight." He looks at Nadia, and she nods encouragingly. "The truth is, our relationship began in an unconventional way," Blake continues. 3 months ago, I was desperate to make my dying grandfather happy. I made up a story about having a girlfriend, and that lie grew into something much bigger than I ever intended. A murmur runs through the crowd of reporters. When it became clear that my grandfather wanted to meet this fictional woman, I panicked. I hired Nadia to pretend to be my fiancée for 1 hour. That's all it was supposed to be. "But it became more than that," a reporter calls out. "Yes, it did," Blake says simply. "Because sometimes the most unexpected circumstances lead to the most real emotions. I fell in love with Nadia, not because I was paying her to be there, but because of who she is. Her strength, her compassion, her refusal to let other people define her worth." He turns to look at her, and the love in his eyes is so clear, so genuine, that she hears several people in the audience sigh. "The Foundation's involvement in our personal relationship was a mistake," Blake continues. "Board members made assumptions, contracts were signed, events were planned based on those assumptions. But none of that changes the fundamental truth: Nadia and I love each other. We want to build a life together. And we refuse to let our relationship be defined by how it started instead of what it's become." A reporter raises her hand. "Ms. Chun, how do you respond to allegations that you've been manipulating Mr. Morrison for financial gain?" Nadia leans toward the microphone, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I respond by telling you about my sister," she says. 15 years ago, when she was 2 years old and needed heart surgery we couldn't afford, the Morrison Foundation paid for everything. They saved her life, and they never asked for anything in return." She can see some of the reporters' expressions softening. "When I met Blake, I had no idea who he was," she continues. "I just saw a man in pain who needed help. And when I found out his grandfather was the person who'd saved my family, I knew I couldn't take his money under false pretenses. So I told the truth, even though it meant giving up more money than I'd ever seen." "But you did eventually accept payment for other work," another reporter points out. "Yes, I did," she says. "Because I'm a writer, and the Morrison Foundation offered me the opportunity to do important work documenting their history. I've spent the last 3 months interviewing families they've helped, researching their impact, writing the story of 60 years of charitable work. That's real work, valuable work, and I'm proud of it." William leans toward his microphone. "If I may," he says, his voice carrying the authority of someone who's commanded rooms like this for decades. "I want to address the real issue here." The room goes quiet. "My grandson is a good man," William says. "He's dedicated his life to helping people, building hospitals, creating housing for families who need it. He made a mistake by lying to me, but he made that mistake out of love. Out of a desire to give a dying old man some peace." His voice grows stronger, more passionate. And Nadia Chun is exactly the kind of woman this foundation was created to support. A young woman who raised her little sister alone, who's worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, who's never asked for help she didn't earn. She's not a gold digger or a con artist. She's a reminder of why we do this work in the first place. He looks directly into the cameras. The Morrison Foundation has helped thousands of families over the years. We've built hospitals, funded medical research, provided scholarships for students who couldn't afford college. And we've done all of that because we believe that good people deserve a chance at happiness. Blake and Nadia deserve that chance too. A reporter raises his hand. What about the allegations of financial impropriety? The foundation has spent significant money on events based on false premises. Every penny of foundation money has been accounted for, Richard Thornton says, stepping up to a microphone at the side of the room. Ms. Chen's biographical work has been legitimately contracted and properly compensated. Event expenses for the upcoming gala are standard and appropriate. There has been no financial impropriety whatsoever. So what happens now? Asks another reporter. Blake and Nadia look at each other, and she can see the question in his eyes. They've planned for this moment, talked about what they would say, but now that it's here, she realizes there's only one answer that matters. Now we get married, she says, her voice carrying clearly through the room. For real this time. Not because a board requires it, not because a contract demands it, but because we love each other and we want to build a life together. The room erupts in questions, but Blake is already reaching into his jacket pocket, pulling out the ring that started this whole crazy journey. Nadia Chun, he says, loud enough for everyone to hear, will you marry me? For real this time. She looks at the ring, the fairy tale ring he bought 6 months ago for a woman he didn't know existed, and then at Blake, this man who's become her whole world. Yes, she says, and lets him slide the ring onto her finger where it belongs. The cameras flash like lightning, but for once, Nadia doesn't care about the publicity or the speculation or what people will write about them tomorrow. All she cares about is the man holding her hand and the life they're about to build together. What do you think about the way Blake and Nadia handled this crisis? Do you believe that love really can overcome any obstacle if two people are willing to fight for it together? Share your thoughts on their journey in the comments below. I'd love to hear what part of their story resonated most with you. 6 months later. The Morrison Foundation Gala is everything Nadia once feared it would be: elegant, overwhelming, filled with people who have more money than she's ever dreamed of. But as she stands beside Blake in the ballroom of Seattle's most exclusive hotel, watching William give what everyone knows will be his last major speech, she realizes she's not afraid anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, William says from the podium, his voice weaker than it once was but still commanding attention, 60 years ago, my wife and I started this foundation because we believe that every child deserves a chance at a healthy, happy life. Tonight, I want to tell you about 2 children who embody everything we've worked for. He gestures toward a table near the front, where Mei Lin is sitting with her boyfriend, a pre-med student who thinks her heart surgery scar is beautiful. At 19, she's everything Nadia hoped she would become: confident, brilliant, ready to take on the world. Mei Lin Chun received her heart surgery through our foundation when she was 2 years old, William continues. Today, she's a college sophomore studying to become a pediatric cardiologist. She wants to save other children the way she was saved. The applause is thunderous, and Nadia feels tears streaming down her face as she watches her sister stand and wave to the crowd. But tonight I also want to tell you about another child we helped, William says, his eyes finding Nadia's across the room. A 13-year-old girl who became her sister's guardian and worked 3 jobs to keep their family together. Who never asked for help she didn't earn, who never gave up even when things seemed impossible. Blake squeezes her hand as the audience's attention turns to her. Nadia Chun Morrison, William says, and the use of her married name still makes her heart skip, is the executive director of our New Young Families Initiative. She's turning her own experience of overcoming challenges into programs that help other young people navigate difficult circumstances. More applause, and Nadia manages to smile and wave even though she's crying. 3 months ago, she'd been terrified of this room, these people, this life. Now she knows she belongs here, not because she married Blake, but because she's found her own way to make a difference. The foundation's future is in good hands, William concludes. My grandson Blake will continue to build hospitals and design spaces that heal. His wife Nadia will ensure that we never lose sight of the human stories behind our mission. And together, They'll carry forward the work that my beloved Eleanor and I began all those years ago. As William returns to his seat to a standing ovation, Blake leans over to whisper in Nadia's ear. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you, Mrs. Morrison?" She laughs, wiping away her tears. "Only about 100 times today." "Not nearly enough," he says, and kisses her temple. Later, after the speeches and the dancing and the seemingly endless stream of donors who want to meet the woman who reformed Blake Morrison, they find themselves alone on the hotel's terrace, looking out over the Seattle skyline. "So," Blake says, loosening his tie, "how does it feel to officially be a society wife?" "Terrifying and wonderful and completely surreal," she admits. "Ask me again in a year when I've figured out what I'm doing." "You already know what you're doing," he says seriously. "You're being yourself. That's all you've ever needed to do." She leans against him, still amazed by how solid and warm and real he is. 6 months ago, he was a stranger in a coffee shop. Now he's her husband, her partner, her home. "Blake," she says. "Yeah. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd said no that day? If I'd told you I couldn't help you?" He's quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I think," he says finally, "that we would have found each other anyway. Maybe not that day, maybe not in that coffee shop, but somehow. Some way. Because what we have, it's not an accident, Nadia. It's not just the result of a desperate moment and a crazy situation." "What is it then?" He turns her to face him, his hands cupping her face in the gesture that's become so familiar she can't imagine living without it. "It's everything," he says simply. "It's home and adventure and safety and challenge all rolled into one. It's the kind of love that makes you want to be better than you thought you could be. Even if it started with a lie." "Especially because it started with a lie," he says, kissing her softly. "Because it proves that even the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings." As they hold each other under the Seattle stars, surrounded by the life they've built together from lies and truth and love and courage, Nadia knows he's right. Sometimes the best love stories begin with the words, "I need your help." And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they end with forever. But their story is just beginning.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.